In the picturesque suburban neighborhood of Maryland in 2012, Maria Jenkins was the embodiment of the perfect wife and mother. Known for her warm smile and unwavering dedication to her family, Maria had spent years building what many considered an idyllic home life. She was deeply devoted to her husband, Richard, and their two children, Sophie and Liam. But beneath the flawless surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, Maria was grappling with a devastating secret: her husband was having an affair. For months, Maria had carried the crushing weight of this betrayal, her heart breaking with each passing day. She had uncovered the truth in fragments: an unfamiliar perfume lingering on Richard's clothes, late nights spent glued to his phone, and a growing emotional distance that was impossible to ignore. At first, she had hoped it was all in her head, a figment of her overactive imagination. But the signs were undeniable, and worse still, the other woman wasn't just anyone, it was Richard's own female employee. Maria was a woman who had always believed in the sanctity of marriage and the power of love to overcome life's challenges. Her parents' enduring union had been her guiding light, a testament to the idea that true love could weather any storm. Her mother, a wise and gentle soul, had once told her, "Marriage isn't just about the easy days, it's about fighting for each other even when it's hard." Those words had stayed with Maria, shaping her view of love and commitment. But now, as she faced the stark reality of Richard's infidelity, she found herself questioning everything she had ever believed about marriage and loyalty. Maria and Richard's love story had started like something out of a romance novel. They met in the late 1990s, fresh out of college, when Maria was full of dreams and Richard was brimming with charm and ambition. He had swept her off her feet with promises of a life filled with adventure and unconditional love. For years, it seemed those promises were fulfilled. They bought a cozy home in Maryland, welcomed their two beautiful children, and built a life that Maria treasured. She took pride in being a stay-at-home mom, pouring her heart into raising Sophie and Liam, while Richard worked tirelessly to provide for their family. But as the years went by, the cracks in their marriage began to show. By 2011, Maria started noticing subtle but troubling changes in Richard. He became more distant, often distracted, and his once warm and engaging demeanor grew cold. When he came home late, the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume would cling to him. At first, Maria dismissed it as stress from work or perhaps her own insecurities. Richard had always been a devoted father and a reliable partner, or so she thought. Soon, the evidence of his betrayal became impossible to ignore. He guarded his phone like a lifeline, keeping it out of her reach and spending hours scrolling through it late at night. Their conversations grew shallow and strained, devoid of the intimacy they once shared. The man who had once been her confidant and partner in everything now felt like a stranger. Maria's breaking point came during a family reunion, a gathering meant to celebrate love and togetherness. Surrounded by relatives and friends, Maria made a bold decision. She could no longer endure the facade of a happy marriage while Richard's betrayal loomed like a dark cloud over her. She had stayed silent for too long, hoping in vain that he would change. But Richard showed no remorse, no desire to repair the damage he had caused. In a moment of unflinching courage, Maria exposed the truth at the reunion, revealing to everyone present that her husband had been having an affair with his employee. The room fell silent, the air thick with shock and disbelief. It was a moment of reckoning for Richard, who could no longer hide behind lies and pretense. For Maria, it was both a heartbreaking and liberating act. A declaration that she would no longer tolerate betrayal and disrespect, even from the man she had once loved so deeply. If you like this video, kindly like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and gripping true crime story like this, and turn on notifications. Maria's story is one of resilience and self-worth, a testament to the strength it takes to confront painful truths and choose yourself when love turns into betrayal. While the perfect family she had worked so hard to create may have crumbled, Maria emerged from the ordeal stronger and more determined than ever to rebuild her life on her own terms. It was on January 5, 2012, when Maria Jenkins' world began to crumble. As she went about her usual routine, folding laundry and tidying up the house, an uneasiness nagged at her. It was a feeling she had tried to suppress for months, but that day, it became impossible to ignore. While sorting through the mail, a thick credit card statement caught her eye. The balance was far higher than usual. Curiosity gnawed at her, and against her better judgment, Maria opened the envelope and started scanning the charges. Her heart sank as she came across repeated transactions from a local luxury hotel. Not just one night, but several bookings spread over the past few months. Each receipt felt like a dagger, each date a reminder of the nights Richard had claimed to be working late. The hotel, a place Richard had no conceivable reason to frequent, confirmed her worst fears. Still, Maria didn't act immediately. She knew she needed more than receipts to confront him, especially if she wanted the truth to come to light. In the weeks that followed, Maria transformed her heartbreak into determination. She began observing Richard more closely, documenting his every move. Late-night work meetings, sudden calls, and unexplained absences became her focus. She waited until he fell asleep to check his phone, careful not to leave a trace. Her hands shook as she scrolled through his messages, and there it was, clear evidence of his betrayal. Intimate conversations between Richard and his female employee painted a picture Maria could no longer deny. The texts revealed more than just an affair, they uncovered the depth of Richard's deception. He had been meeting this woman not just at the hotel but also during work hours, sneaking her into places Maria once thought sacred, like their home. The betrayal was no longer abstract, it was vivid and undeniable. And yet, Maria held back, unsure of how to proceed. By February, Maria had accumulated a damning collection of evidence, photos, texts, and even a few eyewitness accounts from neighbors. But the thought of confronting him terrified her. She feared not only the confrontation itself but what it would mean for her family. Sophie and Liam were her everything, and the thought of shattering their sense of security weighed heavily on her. Despite her pain, a part of her still hoped Richard would come to his senses. On February 15th, Maria finally decided to confront him. With the kids asleep and the house enveloped in an eerie silence, she approached Richard as he sat in the living room, scrolling through his phone. Her heart raced as she began to speak, the words tumbling out faster than she intended. Richard's reaction was exactly what she feared. At first, he denied everything, brushing off her accusations as paranoia. But when Maria laid the evidence before him, the hotel receipts, the messages, and the photos, his facade crumbled. Richard begged for forgiveness, blaming the stress of work and the pressures of life for his actions. For a fleeting moment, Maria allowed herself to believe he could change. But that hope was short-lived. In the days that followed, Richard's remorse gave way to defensiveness. He began accusing Maria of being distant, of prioritizing their children over him. The audacity of his accusations left her speechless, but it also steeled her resolve. Maria's breaking point came on March 3rd, a day she would never forget. While running errands, she returned home to an unsettling sight. Sophie, just 6 years old, ran up to her with the innocent curiosity only a child could possess. "Mommy, who was the lady with Daddy?" she asked. Maria froze, her mind racing. Sophie explained how she had seen her father in the living room earlier with a woman who wasn't her mother. They were sitting too close, laughing, and hugging. The betrayal had now seeped into the lives of her children, the very people Maria had fought to protect. Richard hadn't just cheated on her, he had brought his affair into their home, shattering the sanctity of their family. That night, Maria lay awake in bed, her thoughts racing. There was no going back. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore, it was about reclaiming her dignity, her home, and her children's future. In the following weeks, Maria's resolve hardened. She began documenting everything meticulously, screening Richard's messages, recording his late-night departures, and even tracking his movements. She knew the truth had to come out, and it had to happen in a way that left no room for Richard to manipulate or twist the narrative. By early March, Maria decided that the family reunion, a gathering of relatives and close friends, would be the stage for the ultimate confrontation. If Richard wanted to pretend everything was fine, she would ensure everyone saw the truth. This was no longer about saving their marriage, it was about exposing Richard for who he truly was, a man who had not only betrayed his wife but had also disrespected the home they had built together. Maria's plan was set in motion. With her evidence in hand and her heart heavy but resolute, she prepared to reveal Richard's secret affair with his female employee. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life and showing her children that strength lies in standing up for what is right, even when it's painful. The family reunion would be the turning point, not just for Maria, but for everyone who had been blind to the cracks in the Jenkins' seemingly perfect family. Richard's betrayal had reached its peak, not just in the lies he told or the home he disrespected, but in the way he dragged his affair into the lives of their innocent children. For Maria, that was the ultimate unforgivable act. On the evening of March 6, as Richard packed his suitcase for yet another so-called business trip, Maria sat alone at the kitchen table. Her hands wrapped tightly around a coffee mug, her eyes cold and resolute. There were no more tears to shed, she had cried them all. Now, she was a woman with a plan to expose her husband's affair with his female employee in a way he would never forget. Her mind was set on the upcoming Jenkins family reunion, an annual tradition where relatives from far and wide would gather to celebrate family and unity. This year, on July 4th, it would serve a different purpose, a stage for Maria to reveal the truth about Richard's double life. The irony wasn't lost on her. A celebration of family would be the perfect moment to expose how Richard had destroyed theirs. Maria knew that confronting Richard without undeniable proof would lead to more lies, more manipulation. So she began crafting a strategy to gather irrefutable evidence. She ordered hidden cameras online, devices small enough to be concealed in plain sight. One camera was disguised as a decorative clock and placed on the bedroom dresser. Another was hidden in a family photo frame in the living room. The angles were carefully calculated to capture every damning interaction. In addition to the cameras, Maria purchased a voice-activated recorder, slipping it discreetly into Richard's briefcase. It would capture every whispered conversation and phone call he thought was private. By now, Maria knew Richard's routine like the back of her hand. His arrogance had grown, believing Maria's silence meant she had resigned herself to his infidelity. He couldn't have been more wrong. Over the next few weeks, Maria played her part convincingly. She became emotionally distant, avoided confrontations, and focused her energy on Sophie and Liam. She even acted indifferent toward Richard's increasingly bold behavior, allowing him to think she had stopped caring. Her silence emboldened him, and he grew reckless, bringing Lisa into their home more frequently. Each visit was recorded, every touch, every word captured by the hidden cameras. By the end of May, Maria had a damning collection of evidence, videos of Richard and Lisa in intimate moments, audio recordings of flirtatious phone calls, and incriminating text messages she had retrieved from his phone. The evidence painted a vivid picture of betrayal, proof that Richard's affair with his employee was more than a fleeting mistake. As June gave way to July, preparations for the Jenkins family reunion were in full swing. Richard's parents, proud of their sprawling estate on the outskirts of Maryland, were hosting as they did every year. It was a grand affair, a day of barbecues, games, and laughter under the shade of towering oak trees. For Richard, it was an opportunity to flaunt his picture-perfect family in front of relatives who admired him. For Maria, it was the perfect stage for the truth. Maria played along with the facade, helping with the reunion preparations while hiding her true intentions. She prepared a USB drive containing a meticulously edited compilation of the evidence she had collected. Every damning video, every incriminating audio clip, every text message, compiled into a narrative that would leave no room for denial. The morning of July 4th was bright and warm, the perfect day for a family gathering. As Richard drove their family to his parents' estate, Maria sat quietly in the passenger seat, her face calm but her heart pounding with anticipation. Her plan was ready. The reunion began as expected, with laughter, shared stories, and the smell of barbecue filling the air. Children ran around the backyard while adults mingled, exchanging updates on their lives. Richard was in his element, basking in the attention of relatives who praised his success and admired his seemingly perfect family. Maria waited patiently, blending into the festivities, her outward demeanor betraying none of the storm brewing inside her. When the moment felt right, she approached Richard's father, a man known for his love of tradition and public speeches. She handed him the USB drive, quietly asking if he could play it during the family slideshow later that evening. "It's a little something I put together about our family's journey," she said, her voice steady. He smiled warmly, unsuspecting of the bombshell he was about to help detonate. As the sun set and the family gathered around the projector for the annual slideshow, Maria took her place at the edge of the crowd, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Richard sat near the center, a glass of wine in hand, looking every bit the successful husband and father he pretended to be. The slideshow began with innocent photos, family vacations, childhood memories, and festive gatherings. But then the screen went dark for a moment before the real footage began to play. The room fell silent as the first video appeared, Richard entering the house with Lisa, their bodies too close for mere colleagues. The next clip showed them sitting on the living room couch, whispering and laughing. The audio recordings followed, their flirtatious exchanges and whispered plans echoing in the stunned silence. Gasps filled the room as text messages appeared on the screen, exposing the intimate relationship between Richard and his employee. Richard's face turned pale, his wine glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. His parents looked horrified, his siblings exchanged shocked glances, and the children stared, confused and frightened. Maria finally stood, her voice calm but firm. "This is the truth about Richard," she said. "This is the man who has disrespected me, his home, and worst of all, our children." The fallout was immediate and chaotic. Richard tried to stammer out an explanation, but the evidence spoke louder than any excuse he could muster. His carefully constructed image crumbled before the eyes of the people he valued most. Maria walked out of that reunion not as a victim, but as a woman who had reclaimed her dignity and her life. She had exposed Richard for who he truly was, ensuring that everyone knew the truth about his betrayal. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of peace, knowing she had done what was right for herself and her children. The road ahead would be difficult, but Maria was ready to face it with her head held high. Richard continued his charade, laughing and chatting with relatives, playing the role of the devoted husband and successful businessman. He moved through the room with an air of confidence, utterly oblivious to the fact that the walls of his double life were about to come crashing down. Meanwhile, Maria watched silently from a corner, keeping close to Sophie and Liam. She wasn't nervous anymore. Her mind was calm, her resolve unshakable. She had planned every detail of this moment, and now it was time to execute it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the estate, Richard's father announced that it was time for the annual family slideshow. Everyone gathered in the spacious living room, settling into their seats with drinks in hand. The room buzzed with anticipation, relatives excited to relive cherished memories captured over the years. Maria felt her pulse quicken but maintained her composure, her face unreadable. Richard, as confident as ever, took his seat near the front, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. The projector hummed to life, the large screen at the front of the room flickering as Richard's father began setting up the laptop. Maria seized her moment. She approached casually, a small smile on her face, and offered to help with the setup. Richard's father, trusting her completely, stepped aside, unaware of the USB drive Maria discreetly plugged into the laptop. The room dimmed, the murmur of voices quieting as everyone turned their attention to the screen. The slideshow began as expected, with nostalgic photos of family vacations, weddings, and holiday gatherings. Laughter filled the room as images of younger days played across the screen. But then, the slideshow abruptly shifted. The familiar, heartwarming pictures were replaced by grainy footage. At first, the room remained silent, confused by the sudden change in tone. The first clip showed Richard entering his home with Lisa, his female employee. Their body language was unmistakable, intimate and far from professional. Gasps echoed throughout the room. The footage continued, showing Richard and Lisa in moments of shocking closeness, sitting too close on the couch, touching, and sharing stolen kisses in the very living room where his family now sat in stunned silence. Each clip, though not perfect in quality, was damning. The whispers began, spreading like wildfire through the room. Richard's siblings exchanged wide-eyed glances, his parents stared at the screen in disbelief, and cousins muttered questions under their breath. The atmosphere shifted from warm camaraderie to icy tension. Maria stood at the back of the room, her expression cold and determined. She didn't need to say a word. The truth was playing out for everyone to see. Richard, frozen in his seat, paled as the footage continued. The realization hit him like a freight train, there was no escape from this. He shot a panicked glance toward Maria, his mouth opening as if to plead with her, but she didn't meet his gaze. Desperation set in. Richard leapt from his chair and made a beeline for the laptop, intending to stop the video. But Maria was ready. She stepped forward, positioning herself between him and the table, her stance unyielding. "You think you can keep running from the truth, Richard?" Her voice was calm, but her words cut through the tension like a blade. "Not anymore." Richard froze, his outburst dying in his throat as the room turned against him. The footage transitioned seamlessly into audio recordings Maria had gathered over months of meticulous planning. The room went dead silent as Richard's voice filled the space, whispering sweet nothings to Lisa, making plans to meet her, and even mocking Maria's devotion. Richard's mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. His father's face turned red with anger, his jaw tightening. Murmurs of disbelief filled the room. The final nail in the coffin was a series of text messages that appeared on the screen, detailing explicit exchanges between Richard and Lisa. Every lie he had told, every betrayal, was laid bare for his entire family to see. Richard's confidence, once unshakable, crumbled. He tried to stammer out an explanation, but the evidence was undeniable. The room erupted into chaos, shouts of anger, cries of betrayal, and murmured apologies to Maria. Maria held her ground, finally stepping forward to address the room. "This is the truth," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "This is the man who betrayed his wife, disrespected his family, and brought his affair into the home we built together. This is who Richard Jenkins truly is." Richard's mother burst into tears, his father stood in stunned silence, and his siblings looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. No one came to his defense. Richard tried to speak, to regain control, but Maria silenced him with a single, cutting remark, "You didn't just betray me, Richard. You betrayed all of us. And now, everyone knows." The room was in shambles, the once joyful reunion overshadowed by the weight of Richard's betrayal. Relatives avoided his gaze, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others muttering words of support to Maria as they passed her. Maria walked out of that room with her head held high, her children by her side. She had exposed Richard for the man he truly was, reclaiming her dignity in her future. As the door closed behind her, she felt a sense of liberation. This was not the end of her story, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she no longer lived in the shadow of deceit. Richard had underestimated her strength, but in the end, Maria had proven that the truth always finds a way to come to light. The audio recordings continued to play, filling the room with Richard's incriminating words. His tone, once charming and confident, now rang hollow and deceitful in the ears of his family. Sweet promises to Lisa, casual mockery of Maria's trust, and the sheer audacity of his double life left no room for doubt. Each word acted like a hammer, shattering any remaining fragments of his carefully constructed facade. Richard sat frozen, his face pale, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair as if they could anchor him in this unraveling reality. His parents, seated nearby, exchanged looks of disbelief. His mother's eyes filled with tears, her trembling hands pressed to her lips. His father's expression hardened into one of pure disappointment, his jaw clenched so tightly it seemed it might snap. The room grew heavier with every passing second. Relatives whispered in hushed tones, their voices tinged with shock and disgust. Richard's siblings looked at one another, unable to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the one so clearly exposed on the screen. The tension in the room finally reached its breaking point. As the final recording played, Richard sprang from his seat, his face twisted in rage. He lunged at Maria, his voice rising in a desperate attempt to silence her. "How dare you do this to me?" he bellowed, his movements frantic and uncoordinated. But before he could reach her, his elder brother James stepped in, intercepting him with a firm grip on his shoulders. "That's enough, Richard." James's voice was commanding, his tone laced with disgust. "You've done enough damage. Don't make it worse." Richard struggled for a moment, but the weight of the room's collective judgment bore down on him. He stopped, his shoulders slumping as he glanced around the room, meeting the condemning stares of his family. Maria, standing tall and composed, didn't flinch. She reached into her bag, pulling out a neatly prepared stack of papers. With deliberate precision, she walked to where Richard stood and tossed them at his feet. "Those are the divorce papers," she said, her voice steady but cold. "You'll find everything clearly outlined. Full custody of the kids. Half of everything we built together. And child support, every month, without fail. If you even think of contesting this, remember," she gestured toward the screen still displaying his betrayal, "I have more than enough evidence to bury you." The room was silent, save for the rustle of paper as the divorce documents settled on the floor. Richard stared down at them, his face a mix of anger, humiliation, and defeat. He didn't pick them up. He didn't say a word. In the weeks that followed, Richard's life unraveled further. Maria, armed with her mountain of evidence, moved swiftly through the legal system. The judge, presented with undeniable proof of Richard's infidelity and neglect, sided firmly with Maria. On August 15, 2012, she was granted full custody of Sophie and Liam. Richard lost half of their assets and was ordered to pay monthly child support, with a stern warning that any missed payment would result in severe penalties. Richard's fall from grace wasn't limited to the courtroom. His parents, once his staunchest supporters, could barely bring themselves to look at him. His siblings distanced themselves, ashamed of the scandal he had brought upon their family. Friends and colleagues, hearing whispers of his actions, began to avoid him. For Richard, every day became a reminder of his failures. Each month, as he sent the court-ordered child support, he was forced to confront the reality that his greed and arrogance had cost him everything. For Maria, the journey wasn't without pain, but it was also one of liberation. She threw herself into rebuilding her life, focusing on Sophie and Liam. Surrounded by the support of her friends and community, she began to rediscover herself. The strength she had found during those dark months carried her through. She no longer saw herself as a victim but as a survivor, a woman who had fought back against betrayal and reclaimed her life. The scars of her marriage remained, but they became reminders of her resilience rather than her suffering. As for Richard, his life continued to spiral. He struggled to maintain his job, his once unshakable confidence eroded by the scandal. Isolated and alone, he was haunted by the memory of that fateful family reunion. It had been meant to celebrate unity and love, but it had instead become the stage where his lies and betrayals were laid bare for all to see. The reunion would forever be remembered not for laughter or joy but for the devastating fallout of Richard's actions. For Maria, however, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, a life free from deceit, a life she could finally call her own. If you enjoyed this story and want more captivating content like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to us.